Hi, Mr. Leon. Thank you for meeting with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
So just to launch off into my first question is, what do you do and how do you explain it? How would you explain it to someone outside your field?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I'm the chief financial officer for the largest plastic surgery company in the world, and at a very high level, my responsibility is to look out for the company's finances, um, in many ways, shapes, and forms. That includes various functions such as financial planning and analysis, strategy, tax, accounting, accounts receivable from customers, accounts payable to vendors, treasury services, all our banking relationships, managing our company's debt, and equity structures and so forth. So that gives you a high level overview of what I do as a chief financial officer.
And there's a lot of different sections of this business that you could work in. What drew you specifically to finance?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I was an engineer for 10 years and I knew I wanted to make a change. And at that time, before I went back to business school, I had to decide what I wanted to go back to business school. Well, I had to decide one, am I going to go back to business school? And then two, if I go back to business school, what do I want to concentrate in? And so at the time when I was working at Chrysler, I looked at their executive team and I realized, oh, they all had to have MBAs. And so, and I want to be like them. I wanted to have that big corner office in a tall building. So anyway, so decided to go back to get my MBA. And then I've always been good with math and numbers and been very analytical and so forth. So I felt like that was my natural inclination was to go back and major in finance. And so that's what got me started down that pathway.
So did you originally start off studying engineering and then you switched to the finance world?
Yeah, I went to engineering school. I have an undergrad in engineering, and practiced engineering for 10 years. And then I went back to school, and that's when I learned finance. And I've been more or less doing finance since then. I've dabbled in other parts of business, but I have not gone back to engineering.
And I know fitness was is very heavily impacted by things like COVID when all like the gyms shut down. So how is your business and your job affected by something catastrophic like COVID?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, during COVID, the gyms did shut down, really globally for the most part. There were some
Mhm.
countries that were more relaxed, but for the most part, the entire industry shut down. And it took a while for the industry to sort of crawl out of that because even once gyms reopened, there was social distancing and people had to wear masks, and those were uncomfortable working out, especially if you're doing cardiovascular activities.
Yeah.
Older people still concerned because the rumor was that, if you go to the gym, you're more susceptible to getting COVID and so forth. But turns out that was all a myth. Um, but eventually the industry, made its way back and, it's, growing as fast as it ever has. But I think like, as far as from a business standpoint, we had to take some what I call emergency measures with the business. And predominantly around the workforce, labor, was our biggest expense, and we had to go through a combination of layoffs and reduced hours. In some cases, we did what we call furloughs, which essentially temporarily put someone on the sideline let them collect unemployment while they don't have a job, but they had a essentially a guarantee of coming back and working for us. So it was essentially a temporary layoff, so to speak. We reduced salaries for the executive team to kind of make it through that rough period, and
Yeah.
then so we made it. We made it through the other side, and um, all's well as ends well.
Yeah. And so, as a chief financial officer, I must imagine you talk to a lot of people in other parts of the company. So, how do you build those relationships and networks within that company?
Yeah, it's a good question. You it's a variety of ways. In some ways, it's almost you almost you do it by default, just because finance cuts across all sections of the
Yeah.
business, um, and so but part of it's based on your own initiative of proactively reaching out to at least at first. Yeah, when you first join a company, there's proactive reach. Whether someone's proactively reaching out to you, you're proactively reaching out to them at a minimum as an introduction. But when you look at it from a business standpoint, when we're looking at making investments in the business, we work with different functions in the company to build business cases to determine, do we want to spend that money? Are we going to get the right returns from spending that money and so forth? That's just one example. There's other examples like, forecasting the business in the future, in some cases, 5 years out from now. And we work very closely with the business leaders on those long-term forecasts.
And so, how do you make those investments? Is it really like instinct, or is it like a lot of research? Like, what goes into those thought process?
Yeah, it's both. There's science and there's art. There's the scientific part is, building a model with assumptions that are vetted, to the extent that they can be vetted, with respect to, okay, what's the cost of this initiative, and then what, ultimately, revenue, profitability, cash flow is gonna come out of that investment and when. And then there are, a variety of sort of call it economic calculations that we do to determine if an investment has the right return. But the art of it is that because you're thinking about the future and the future is unknown, that's where you have to use, experience and intuition, um, gut feeling and whatnot to, kind of put the finishing touches on the model, if you want to call it that.
And so, as an engineer to finance, how does that kind of engineering part of your brain help you with your day-to-day life or like your tasks now?
Yeah, I think the biggest crossover is I'd call it the analytical and solving problem phases. Um, as an engineer, I dealt with a lot of data. As a CFO, I deal with a lot of data, and so in that sense, I think the skill set has transitioned nicely. And then, the analysis piece of it as well, I think it's transitioned, very nicely when, let's say, as an engineer, you're testing. Now, think about the cars that are out on the road today, and they're self-driving cars, and there's all this data coming from these cars, and that data needs to be looked at and reviewed and analyzed and determined, okay, are these cars safe? Um, can we make it better? And so there's sort of a continuous improvement loop. And it's the same thing in finance. You have a lot of data to analyze, and um, you need to bring it to a conclusion in some form, and you want it to be right. Like, if you're engineering cars, um, and people's lives are at stake, and you're making decisions based on data, you need the data and the analysis to be right. As on the finance side, it's the same thing. When you're dealing with the company's money, if you make the wrong moves, you can bankrupt the company, everyone
Yeah.
loses a job, the company goes out of business, and so forth. So they each have kind of, there's a lot of sort of translation there, have their own sort of unique, risks, if you want to call it that.
Hmm. And how did your undergrad and business school degrees help you with your work, or did you have to learn like kind of the business from scratch?
It's an interesting question. Um, I would say my honest answer is that I probably have used in my career 5 or 10% of what I learned in school, and the rest of it has been job training. So um, I don't, I think it was helpful to have that foundation in going to school and covering those bases. And it certainly opens up opportunities for you, but it doesn't, like in the particular schools and degrees that I got, I wouldn't say they necessarily prepared me for um, what I went through in the real world. Not, and when I say that, I mean the exact classroom work itself. Now, when I was in undergrad, I did have a unique opportunity where, I would go to school for 12 weeks and then I'd work for 12 weeks at General Motors and I'd rotate. So the 12 weeks I'd spend rotating at General Motors was on the job training. And so, but even then, so it prepared me in that sense because I was in the what I call fully cooperative program in my undergraduate, but it wasn't the classroom learning that made me good. It was actually the on the job training that made me good.
Hmm. And um, what's one habit or like practice that helped you, like especially that you built up during your time in the workforce? Like I've heard from others making lists the night before and then of like checking off and what work you get done has worked a lot.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean,
If
there's
any
a
at
lot.
all.
Yeah, like when you're saying, are you looking for like productivity type of
Or
hacks or,
anything that you found helpful, like accomplish
well,
your
what,
work or
well,
organize.
yeah, like one thing that's very helpful now, and it's really kind of front and center, is AI. Um, and I still like we're still somewhat in the early innings of
Mhm.
better utilizing AI, but as a CFO, I know it's helped our group become more productive and do our work faster in certain aspects. Like it, helps tremendously in terms of like organizing data and um, manipulating data and in some cases analyzing data and um, putting it in a format that can be understood by anyone in a company, um, putting the presentations and so forth that in some cases would take days of work that you can now do in, a matter of minutes or hours.
Yeah, I have found that that's really helpful with my productivity. Like you can automate menial and boring tasks that would have
Yes,
otherwise taken you long times.
absolutely.
And then my last question is for you is if there's a college student fresh out of college waiting or wanting to get into the business world, what would be one piece of advice that you'd give to that person?
Um, is it like when you say advice, are you saying like how to get a job, or if I get a job, like what should I do in the job to be good, or
Oh,
what?
what you could do in a job to excel and I guess set yourself apart.
Yeah, I think I mean we talked about AI. The other aspect of it is you can be smart, but you really have to show initiative and be a go-getter. Um, and you got to put the time in. And, um, there's these various generations that have kind of, like millennials and Gen Zs and different generations. And, I'm a Gen Xer. Um, but, the Generation X were taught that, like, you got to be independent thinkers. You're going to have to put your time in. Um, Whereas, like, for example, the millennials came out, were more entitled and really didn't want to go through the grind. And although I think that, at least, some of that generation, their mindset's probably shifted to a degree, and they've realized, okay, things aren't just going to be given to me for doing nothing. So, um, you again, so bringing it all the way around, you've got to be able to, go through the grind. If that's truly, what how you want to grow your career. Some people may be happy, being in an entry level job their entire life, and if that's what makes them happy and they're fine doing that, then
Yeah.
that's that. But if you want to climb the corporate ladder, you got to put the work in.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much for your time, Mr. Leon.
Yeah, absolutely. Good luck with everything.
All right, thank you. Have a nice day.
All right. You too. Take care. Bye.